The moment the Dhamma Eye opens, when all intentions stop, the Buddha. Sometimes, while you're meditating and listening to a Dhamma talk, you want to hear about what you're experiencing right now and what you can do with it. Other times, it's good to hear about what could happen right now. These things might not be happening yet, but when they do happen, they'll be right here, and it's good to be prepared beforehand. One of the major milestones in the practice is what's called the gaining of the Dhamma Eye. It's also called stream entry, and it's the first of the noble attainments. It's expressed in Pali. Yankinchi samudaya dhammam sabantam nirodha dhammanti. Whatever is subject to origination is all subject to cessation. Now, some people see this simply as a statement that everything that arises passes away. In other words, you accept the fact of inconstancy or impermanence. But what kind of experience would legitimately lead you to accept that principle? And why would it be a milestone? Actually though, the canon's language is very particular. Notice that the insight is not about arising, it's about origination, the act of causing something. And you have to think about what experience would lead you to say something to yourself like that, where it would both be legitimate and natural. In other words, it really would be well-founded and would occur spontaneously to the mind. In the canon, there are some cases where people who already had a background as wandering ascetics are listening to the Buddha's teachings, and it's almost always in conjunction with the Four Noble Truths that they would gain this particular insight. Other times, you see people who have no religious background at all. They listen to the Buddha's teachings, where sometimes they would be given the graduated discourse to build up to the Four Noble Truths, and this is the insight they would come away with. Even in the case of the person who was sent to kill the Buddha, and then the people who were sent to kill the person who killed the Buddha, and then the people who were sent to kill the people who killed the person who killed the Buddha. The first man came toward the Buddha and was suddenly frozen stiff with fear. The Buddha said to him, "Have no fear." The man came closer. The Buddha taught him the graduated discourse and the Four Noble Truths, and the man became a stream enterer right there, gaining the Dhamma Eye. The Buddha then told him not to go by the path he had been told to go, where the other ruffians were waiting to kill him. And so the man left by another path. The other ruffians saw that the first person wasn't coming, so they went to find him and they met up with the Buddha. He taught them the Dhamma, and they too gained the Dhamma Eye. You can imagine that these were pretty rough characters. So what kind of experience would lead even people like that to come to the conclusion that whatever is subject to origination is all subject to cessation? And why would it be such a big milestone? Part of the answer lies in the conversations that takes place when Sariputta, at that time just a wanderer of another sect, first hears the Dhamma from Ven, Asaji, and gains the Dhamma Eye. He goes back to tell Moggallana, his friend. Moggallana sees Sariputta coming from the distance and he says, "Your face is bright, your eyes are bright. Has something happened? Have you seen the Deathless?" Sariputta says, "Yes." So, that's the first clue. You're not just watching things arising and passing away. You've seen the Deathless, something that doesn't arise, doesn't pass away. In fact, it's that experience that there is a deathless element that can be touched at the mind. Once you've had that experience, you look back at everything else you've experienced up to that point, and you realize that this is not subject to origination or passing away. It has always been there, and it's not going to change. It's outside of time, while everything else is inside time and is subject to arising and passing away. The other clue comes from the words origination and cessation. These are not the words simply of impermanence, of simple arising and passing away. These are the words related to the Four Noble Truths and dependent co-arising, where the word origination is always used in conjunction with the way things arise from causes, and the causes are almost always in the mind. For instance, the origination of suffering is craving, and where is craving? It's in the mind. What's the origination of the causal chain that leads to craving? It's ignorance. That too comes out of the mind. You then begin to realize all the other things that come out of the mind. Fabrication, name and form, consciousness, your experience of the six sense media. The fact that you're aware of the six senses comes from the fact that there's something in the mind that flows out to the senses. That's what allows you to have that experience of the senses to begin with. But when you can see the mind at a point where it's not doing that, then the senses fall away, all six of them. What the Buddha refers to as the all. And the deathless is beyond the all. Although the texts say you have to be very careful of the way you talk about it, still, even though it's something that's not to be described, it is to be experienced. So when you've had that experience, you come back from it. And that's the experience that cuts through the three first fetters. It's not as if you decide that you're going to give up on the three fetters, your identity views, uncertainty, and grasping at habits and practices ahead of time. These aren't things you decide. It's the experience of the deathless that cuts through those fetters. Your uncertainty is gone because you realize that what the Buddha said was true. He knew what he was talking about. There really is a deathless element, and you realize how you got there. It wasn't just through obeying rules. You had to use your concentration and your discernment to be really observant about what's going on in the mind when it's concentrated. That's why you don't grasp at habits and practices again, and the fact that there is an awareness that has nothing to do with the aggregates. That's why you would never give your allegiance to any idea that yourself is in any way related to the aggregates, because there are no aggregates in that experience, and yet there is an awareness. You don't take that awareness as yourself, although the problem is that if you stay at stream entry or in any of the first three stages of awakening, there is still going to be a lingering sense of self, although it's not defined in connection with the aggregates, either as identical with the aggregates, or possessing the aggregates, or in the aggregates, or containing the aggregates within it. So it's not as if you decide to cut the fetters. The fetters get cut for you through the experience of the deathless. Another misunderstanding about the Dhamma Eye is that some people say that stream entry is when you see that there is no self. But again, you have to ask, what kind of experience would give you valid grounds for saying that there is no self? They say, you let go of everything, you blank out, and there's nothing. But that doesn't prove anything. After all, there are states of concentration that the Buddha calls non-perception, where you totally blank out, but they're not noble states. If you happen to die while you're in them, you go on to the state of non-percipient beings, where you're totally unconscious. When that attainment wears off, you regain consciousness and leave that state, and then you come back to be reborn again. But that's not proof of anything. In fact, if seeing that there is no self were part of stream entry, then why did the Buddha have to give the not-self discourse to the five brethren after they had all become stream enterers, The answer comes from a passage in the canon, where a non-returner says that at his level of attainment, you don't identify around the 5 aggregates, even though there is still a lingering sense of self, a lingering sense of I am. He says, it's like the smell of a detergent used to wash clothes. You wash the clothes and you wash the detergent out, but there's still some lingering scent. So when the Buddha was teaching the 5 brethren the not-self discourse, that was what he was getting at. That lingering sense of self as well, the conceit I am. So, stream entry is not simply accepting the fact of impermanence, and it's not seeing that there is no self. It's having an experience of the deathless, and you realize that you had to follow a path of practice to arrive at the threshold of the deathless. The deathless itself was nothing that you did. In fact, it comes at that part of the present moment where you're not putting any intentional input in at all, not even the intention not to do anything. So, it hits you by surprise. When you come back from that experience, that's when the Dhamma Eye arises. You've seen something that was not originated, not subject to cessation. And from that vantage point, you realize that anything you'd experienced up to that point was fabricated through the actions of the mind. Yet here, you found something that was not fabricated in the mind. That's why it's so radical, because you realize that it's also the end of suffering. Now, stream entry is said to be the arising of the Dhamma Eye, because you see this, but you don't fully experience it. In other words, you have your glimpse, and then it's gone, but it has already made a big change in you. There's an analogy given in the canon. It's like seeing water at the bottom of the well. You haven't yet drunk the water or gone down to get immersed in the water. However, you know it's there. Of course, the most useful thing to discuss about stream entry is not what it is, but how to get there. One of the most useful discussions is simply the definition of the stream, the Noble Eightfold Path, which is something you can do. You can't do the deathless, but you can do the path. The path takes you there, so you focus your energy on the path. The other discussion of how to get to stream entry, of course, is the 4 factors for stream entry. You find a person of integrity, you listen to the true Dhamma, you apply appropriate attention, and you practice the Dhamma in accordance with the Dhamma. That's how you get there. It's all very plain stuff. As the Buddha said, there were no secrets that he kept up to the last moment. In other words, it's not the case that he said, you do this practice, and when you get near stream entry, I'll tell you something special and new. It's not like that at all. You just do what you've been doing, but you do it very well, and you do it very carefully. Try to get the mind centered. Try to protect that sense of the centered mind. When you detect any stress in that state of concentration, you ask yourself, what am I doing to cause that? When you see the action, and it's usually a perception, although sometimes it can also be directed thought and evaluation. Any of the factors of right concentration that you have to let go of to get to higher levels, you just let the action go. And how do you get the mind to see that? Once you've settled in, as the Buddha says, you first indulge in the concentration. In other words, you don't just skip across the different states of concentration. You have to learn how to inhabit them so that you get to know them well, so that when you see something that is disturbing your concentration, it's your own discernment that sees it. It's not because a book told you that you had to drop this factor or that factor. You see that you're doing something that's causing a disturbance and that you can drop it, and yet the mind can stay concentrated. In fact, it gets more solidly concentrated when you drop whatever it was. If it so happens that you drop it and you lose your concentration, that's a sign you're not ready to let it go yet. But it's the same process again and again, just that it gets more precise. Your mindfulness gets more continuous, your discernment gets sharper, and there comes a point when you realize that if you stay where you are, there's still going to be some stress. But if you move to any other form of concentration, there's also going to be stress. So what's the alternative between staying or moving? This dilemma provides a possibility for there to be a moment where there's no intention, no intentional input at all. Nothing is fabricated. Things can open up, and the Dhamma Eye gets to see. So, regardless of your background, whether you've studied a lot or studied only a little, it doesn't matter. It's not a question of simply adopting the Buddha's views and getting to a point where you agree. Yes, I now agree with the Buddha. It's more that he gives you a task to do, and as you do the task, you're going to learn some important things about what actually is possible in the mind. And that possibility is there for everybody, which is why the Dhamma Eye is always the same for everybody. The 5 brethren who had practiced for many years, as well for the ruffian who was going to kill the Buddha, and then the other ruffians who were going to kill the earlier ruffians, they all saw the same thing. So, the important part is doing the practice, doing it very meticulously and very well, while using your discernment and ingenuity to ask the right questions, so that the questions become the key that will unlock and open things up. The rewards of stream entry. Focus on your breath. As for any noises outside, just let them go past. As Ajahn Chah used to say, it's not that the noises are disturbing us. We tend to disturb the noises. In other words, the mind makes comments on the noise, and then those comments are the things that disturb the mind. So just let the noise go through you and out the other side. Stay with the sensation of the breathing coming in and going out. Allow it to be comfortable. When you focus on the breath, try not to tense up around the breath. Think of the spot where you're focused as spreading out. Spreading out. Whatever energy is there gets spread out, so that you can suffuse the body with a sense of well-being. Then try to maintain that. This is what we do with the path. We maintain it. As the Buddha pointed out, the different noble truths have different duties. You're trying to comprehend stress and suffering to see what it is and where it comes from. When you see where it comes from, you see the different types of craving that lead to that stress, and you can abandon them. You do that by developing the path. The one noble truth, where you don't have to do much, is to realize the cessation of suffering, because it's not something you have to fabricate. It's not something you have to put together. It just is. So work on the development, work on the maintaining. In other words, if good qualities are not there in the mind yet, you try to give rise to them. When they're there, you try to develop them, maintain them, so that they grow. Now, there will come points in the path where you don't have to do any more maintaining of certain things. The Buddha talks about the different levels of awakening, of the different noble paths and their fruits. The first one is called stream entry. The image is that once you enter a stream, you're going to end up in the ocean for sure. It may take a long time, it may take a short time, but you're sure to get there. In the same way, the Buddha says that someone who's reached this particular level of the practice is sure to gain full awakening within 7 lifetimes at most. Those 7 lifetimes can be human lifetimes or heavenly lifetimes. If they're heavenly lifetimes, they're going to be long, but none of the rebirths will ever be lower than the human. That's a guarantee. Yet when we read about the qualities of a stream enterer, sometimes they seem a little bit disappointing. The texts say that they're confirmed in their conviction in the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha, and they have precepts that are pleasing to the noble ones, untorn, conducive to concentration. We look at ourselves and say, well, we have conviction in the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha too, and we observe the 5 precepts. What's the difference? The difference is that stream enterers have reached a point where they don't have to keep on maintaining these qualities. They don't have to work on them. Their attainment is that they've seen the Deathless. That verifies their conviction in the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. They've seen that the Buddha was right. There really is a deathless happiness that you can attain through the practice. He was right. The Dhamma is right. And all those who have reached that attainment since the Buddha, following the path, that's the noble Sangha. They're right too, which is why they say that a stream enterer's conviction is verified or confirmed. The same with the precepts. They've seen the power of their actions. Their actions are what put together their experience of the 6 senses. When there's no intentional action in the present moment, all the 6 senses fall away. At the same time, you realize that you could have had this experience many times before, but you kept ignoring it. There were things that got in the way. What got in the way were your own unskillful actions. So now, as a result, you would never intentionally break the 5 precepts again, which means that stream enters don't have to work at these things anymore. As for us, we're still working. Just the other day, I had someone ask a question. How can you continue to believe in the principle of karma when you see so many cruel and evil people getting rewarded? That doubt gets into the mind sometimes, even for people who have been firm in observing the precepts. But for a stream enterer, that doubt is gone. There's no way it's going to come back. For the rest of us, there can come times when life gets really, really bad. You look at yourself and you say, I haven't done anything really bad. Why am I experiencing all this trouble? There are also times when society breaks down and you realize that if you don't steal, you're going to starve. Are you willing to starve? Some people say yes, other people say no. But your unwillingness to break the precepts is something you have to work on. That's the difference. So do your best to work on these things. Keep reminding yourself that when the Buddha talks about the results of karma, he too said there are times when people get rewarded for breaking the precepts. He gives an example of someone who kills the enemy of the king, and the king rewards him. He steals from the enemy of the king rewards him. He sneaks off and has sex with the wives of the enemy of the king is happy, gives him a reward. He tells a joke that involves a lie, but it amuses the king. He gets a reward. He gets drunk together with the king likes him. He gets rewarded. We see this in life all the time. The question is, are we going to let that discourage us? We have to remember when the Buddha talked about the results of karma, he didn't say that they're going to be instantaneous. It's not the case that you break a precept and lightning strikes you. Sometimes nothing happens for a long time, even for lifetimes. But that potential for bad results is there. It'll ripen at its own pace, depending on the other things you do, but it never gets erased. So you've got to learn how to talk to yourself, to maintain your sense of conviction in the principle of karma, your conviction in the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha, and in your willingness to make sacrifices for the precepts. Again, Think of the long term. There are people who get rewarded for breaking the precepts. We see this every day. When they get into power, they can make life miserable for everybody else, but they seem to be happy. That's seeing things in the short term. This is why the practice requires a sense of conviction in the Buddha and in the principle that if you believe in the power of your actions and that's something you want to believe in, then you have to accept some of the consequences. One of them is this: our actions are complex in giving the results. Sometimes we get results right away. Sometimes it takes time. It also means you're sitting here receiving the results of past actions and present actions. Sometimes it's hard to tell which is which. But when you see that something's coming up in the mind that you didn't intend to have come up, just write that off. That's the result of past karma. The question now is, what are you going to do with it? What you do with it is your present karma. That's something you can control, something you can change. In this way, having faith in the principle of karma makes you more heedful here in the present moment. And that's all to the good. There are people who say, I can't believe in the principle of karma. I can't believe in the principle of rebirth, because there's no empirical proof for these things. Well, the Buddha never said there was going to be empirical proof. What he offers is a pragmatic proof. The pragmatic proof is this: if you believe in the principle of karma, have faith in the Buddha's awakening, what kind of person will you be? What kind of actions will you do? What kind of actions will you avoid? You realize you'll become a better person. Years back, I was talking to a group of people who had a club. You see them all around. They're the year left to live clubs. I told them it would be really interesting if, instead of saying, suppose you had only 1 year left to live, how would you live your life? Wouldn't it be better to say, suppose you really believed in karma and rebirth, how would you live your life? A year later, one of the persons in the group came back to me and said, when you first said that, I didn't like it, so I asked myself why. I realized that I would have to become a better person. Well, that's the whole point. The Buddha's teachings are here to make you a better person, because in becoming a better person, you're in a better position to put an end to suffering. When you observe the precepts, the mind is more at peace with itself. There may be some sacrifices, as I said, but you know you haven't sacrificed your inner goodness. When you maintain your inner goodness, it's a lot easier to settle down with a sense of well-being. Whatever discernment comes up in a mind like that is going to be a lot more honest. So we believe in these things because they make us behave better, make us behave more skillfully, because we see the importance of our actions. Bit by bit, this gets confirmed as we follow the path and finally get to that path, called the path to stream entry, where all the factors of the Noble Eightfold Path come together and they yield the fruit and experience of the Deathless, something outside of space, outside of time. It's not even in the present moment. The present moment, of course, is part of time. But this is something different. It has nothing to do with the 6 senses, yet there is an awareness. It's called consciousness without surface. The Buddha's image is of a light beam that doesn't land on anything. Because it doesn't land, you can't see it. It's only when a light beam lands on something and reflects that you can see the light. Yet even though you can't see a beam that's not reflected, that doesn't mean it's not there. There's a huge sense of relief when you have that experience. When you come back to the 6 senses, you realize how much pain and heaviness there is in the 6 senses. Even in pleasant sights, sounds, smells, tastes, and tactile sensations. As the Buddha said, Stream enterers are complete in their development of virtue, and they have some concentration along with some discernment. The concentration was the amount of concentration that enabled them to get their minds to settle down, at least long enough for the path to come together. They haven't mastered concentration yet. That comes later. And they've had the discernment that allows them to let go of the path after they've developed it, which allows them to have at least a taste or a glimpse of the deathless. It's called the Dhamma Eye. You see the deathless, but you're not fully immersed in it. It's like seeing the water in the bottom of the well. You're not immersed in it, but you know it's there. That's enough to have a huge impact on the mind. So when the Buddha says that people like this have completed their virtue, that their virtues are pleasing to the noble ones, and that they have confirmed conviction in the Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha, it's not a small attainment. It's a major milestone in your practice, that you don't have to work at these things anymore. You work at the more subtle and delicate levels of practice in terms of concentration and discernment, but the basics are now taken care of. They're solid because they're based on an experience outside of space and time. Things in space and time can't erase that. So the qualities of a stream enterer are actually more impressive than they sound at first. As we reflect on them, we realize that these are things we still have to work on. We can't get complacent about our conviction in the Buddha, Dhamma, and the Sangha, because there might be events that would shake that conviction. It's not well founded yet. It's like a house built on rickety supports. A little bit of wind, or maybe a flood, can wash the house away. So you have to do your best to keep on fixing the foundations, making them as strong as you can. The same with your precepts. The Buddha said stream enterers are virtuous, but they're not made out of virtue, which means they don't build a sense of self around their virtues, which of course tells us that if we haven't reached that stage yet, we have to keep on building an identity around, I'm a virtuous person. The behavior that would break the precepts is beneath me. Have that sense of shame. Have that sense of pride. Shame at the idea of doing lowly actions. Pride in your sense of self-worth. Work on maintaining that. As Ven. Ananda once said, you have to have the conceit that you're capable of doing this. You can build up a sense of conceit around your precepts, not in the sense that you're better than other people, but simply that you don't want your behavior to be influenced by people who are not following the precepts. You have to keep telling yourself, I'm better than that. That's not the kind of person I am. So do your best to maintain your conviction. Do your best to maintain your virtue. As long as they're not fully established, you've got to keep looking after them. It's only then that you have some hope for safety.